There's a specific kind of quiet panic that happens at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. You're not doing anything dramatic. You're just lying there, phone in hand, and for some reason you open your bank app and you stare at the number. And the number stares back. And it's not zero necessarily, but it's close enough to zero that zero doesn't feel that far away. And the worst part isn't the number itself. The worst part is the voice that comes right after it. The one that says, "How is this possible? I've been working this whole time. Where did it go?" If you've ever had that exact moment, that specific hollow feeling at 11 p.m. when the number doesn't match the effort, drop a "me too" in the comments. Because I promise you, millions of people are having that same moment tonight, alone, thinking they're the only one. You're not. And here's what nobody is telling you about why that number is what it is. It's not because you're bad with money. It's not because you don't work hard enough. It's not because you made some catastrophic financial mistake that ruined everything. Most of the time, the real reason your savings account looks the way it does in 2026 is quieter than that, more invisible, more designed. Let me explain what I mean. There's a concept I want you to hold onto through this whole conversation. I'm going to call it the Financial Masquerade. It's not a new idea exactly, but in 2026 it has reached a level of sophistication that previous generations simply never had to navigate. The financial masquerade is the gap between what people's lives look like and what their bank accounts actually say. And that gap has never been wider. The Federal Reserve's most recent consumer finance data shows that nearly 57% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency expense without borrowing. More than half. And yet, scroll through any platform right now and what do you see? Vacations, new cars, renovated apartments. Aesthetics so carefully assembled they look like magazine spreads. The visual language of financial comfort everywhere you look, and the actual financial reality of most households sitting just beneath the surface, invisible, quietly suffocating. That tension is not an accident. Think about what it costs just to look normal in 2026. Not wealthy, not impressive, just normal. There's a streaming stack. Most households are now running 4 to 6 subscriptions simultaneously. There's a phone upgrade cycle, which is quietly accelerated every 12 to 18 months because the social and professional pressure to have a current device is real and documented. There's the food delivery that started as an occasional convenience and became a baseline expectation. There's a gym membership, the cloud storage, the premium version of the app you use for work, the music service, the platform that hosts the content you make or consume, or both. A 2024 study from the research firm C++ found that the average American household underestimates their monthly subscription spending by nearly $133. Not by a little, by $133 every single month. That's money people are spending and not even tracking, because the whole model of subscription billing is psychologically engineered to stay beneath the threshold of conscious attention, small enough to not trigger alarm, frequent enough to quietly drain everything. And none of that touches the bigger expenses, the ones with the real weight. I want you to stop for a second and think about the last time you spent money not because you needed something, but because you needed to feel like you were keeping up. Not envy, exactly. Something quieter. A low-grade anxiety that if you didn't have the thing, you'd fall behind some invisible line that separates people who are doing okay from people who are not. Most of us have felt that. We just don't usually say it out loud. Here's where the masquerade gets expensive. Travel in 2026 has become one of the most powerful forms of social currency that exists. Not just going somewhere, but being seen going somewhere. The check-in, the aesthetic, the proof of mobility, and the financial architecture that makes that possible for most people is not savings. It's credit. It's buy now, pay later. It's the kind of debt that doesn't announce itself loudly. It just quietly multiplies in the background while you're already home and back at work. A weekend trip that costs $800 on paper, charged to a card carrying 24% APR and paid off over 6 months, costs closer to $1,100 by the time the interest is done with it. That's not a lecture. That's just the math. And the math doesn't care how good the photos were. The Lending Tree reported in 2025 that more than 36% of Americans who traveled in the past year went into debt to do it, more than 1 in 3. And of those, Nearly half said the debt took longer than 3 months to pay off, which means that the weekend that lived on the internet for 48 hours is still being paid for at the kitchen table 6 months later. That's the invisible ledger of curated travel, the financial hangover that nobody posts about. And look, I'm not saying don't travel. I'm not saying don't live. What I am saying is that there's a version of living that is being sold to you right now, on every platform, at every scroll, that is specifically designed to keep you spending on experiences that photograph well and compound nothing. And the people designing those systems understand human psychology better than most therapists do, which is exactly what makes the next part of this so important to understand. Because the travel is just one layer. The car in the driveway, or rather the car you'll never actually own, is where it gets even more quietly devastating. Most people don't think of their car payment as a wealth destruction mechanism. They think of it as just a bill, one of those fixed monthly numbers you account for and move on from. But in 2026, the leasing and financing models that dominate the auto industry have been engineered with precision that would genuinely impress you if it weren't actively working against you. Here's what's actually happening. The average new car payment in the United States crossed $735 a month in 2025. Not a luxury vehicle necessarily. Average. And lease terms have been restructured so that the monthly number feels more manageable while the total cost over time quietly balloons. The trade-in cycle has shortened. The technology obsolescence narrative, the idea that your car software will become outdated, that you'll need the newer safety features, that staying current is practically responsible, has been woven so deeply into the marketing that people genuinely believe rotating out a vehicle every 2 to 3 years is a form of financial wisdom. It is not. When you lease, you are renting the depreciation. You are paying for the steepest part of the vehicle's value loss and handing the asset back at the end with nothing to show for it. No equity, no ownership, just the option to start the cycle again. And the reason this model exists is not to serve you. It's to ensure that your money moves toward a manufacturer's balance sheet every single month for the rest of your working life, without ever producing a single dollar of net worth on your side of the ledger. The tech leasing model has followed the exact same logic. Phones, laptops, tablets, wearables. The upgrade culture is not organic. It was architected, and the social pressure to be current, to have the camera that can actually capture the content that keeps you visible, makes the financial trap feel like a personal choice when it's actually a very well-funded system. I want you to think about someone you know, maybe a coworker, a friend, someone from your hometown you follow online. They always seem to have the newest thing, the updated phone, the clean car, the fresh fit. And you probably had a moment, maybe more than one, where you looked at their life and felt something uncomfortable. Not quite jealousy. Something closer to confusion. Like, how? How are they doing all of that? Here's the answer most people never say out loud. A lot of them aren't. Not really. The appearance of financial ease is, in many cases, entirely credit-funded. And the loneliness of that reality, keeping up a performance nobody asked for, is something a lot of people carry completely alone. There's a term in personal finance called financial escape velocity. It sounds technical, but the concept is simple, and I want you to hold on to it. Financial escape velocity is the point at which your money starts working harder than you do, where your savings and investments are generating enough return that you are no longer entirely dependent on your next paycheck to survive. It's not about being rich. It's about reaching the threshold where you have options, where a job loss doesn't become a catastrophe, where a medical bill doesn't unravel everything. Most financial researchers peg that threshold at somewhere between 3 and 6 months of living expenses in liquid savings and an investment balance growing consistently enough to compound meaningfully over time. Vanguard's research consistently shows that investors who begin contributing even modest amounts before age 30 and leave them untouched end up with dramatically different outcomes than those who start at 35 or 40, not because of income differences, but purely because of compounding time. The masquerade directly attacks your ability to reach that threshold. Every dollar going toward a lease is a dollar not compounding. Every subscription that slipped past your conscious attention is a dollar not in an index fund. Every credit-funded vacation still being paid off in month 5 is eroding the interest you could have been earning instead of paying. The math is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly works in one direction, or the other, depending on where the money goes. And here's what makes this genuinely hard, and why I want to say this carefully. The people caught in the masquerade are not reckless. They are not irresponsible. Most of them are doing exactly what the culture around them modeled. They grew up watching adults manage life through monthly payments. They came of age in a digital environment where the visible lifestyle and the actual bank balance of the people they followed were never connected. They were handed a set of financial behaviors that looked normal because everyone around them was doing the same thing. And nobody ever sat down and showed them the compounding cost of all of it laid out together. If you grew up without anyone in your household talking about investing or net worth or compounding interest, drop a number in the comments. Just your age when you first heard those concepts explained in a way that actually made sense. Because I think a lot of people watching this are going to realize they were 40 years into a financial life before anyone showed them the map. That absence of information is not a personal failure. It's a structural one. And understanding that distinction matters because shame makes people freeze. Clarity makes people move. So let's talk about what moving actually looks like. Because here's the thing about the masquerade. It's not held together by income. It's held together by habit and invisibility. The subscriptions persist because nobody audits them. The lease renews because the alternative was never seriously modeled. The travel goes on the card because that's what the card is for, right? And all of it continues not because people are choosing it consciously, but because it never gets examined in the light long enough to feel like a choice at all. Which means the first real move is not a budget overhaul. It's not a radical lifestyle change. It's something much quieter and much more powerful than either of those things. It's simply deciding to look, to actually open the full picture, every subscription, every payment, every recurring charge, and see what the performance is actually costing. Not to judge it, not to feel bad about it, just to see it clearly for the first time, maybe ever, because you cannot redirect what you cannot see. And once you see it, really see it, something shifts, not dramatically, but permanently. And that shift is exactly where the real work begins. Not the hard work, not the grind, just the quiet, consistent work of building something that's actually yours. Let me tell you about a woman named Danielle. She's 31, lives in Atlanta, makes about $58,000 a year working in healthcare administration. By every external measure, Danielle looks like someone who's doing fine. Nice apartment in a good neighborhood. A leased SUV that's clean and current. She travels 2 or 3 times a year, always documented, always aesthetically coherent. Her Instagram suggests a life of managed comfort. Her co-workers assume she has her finances together because she presents that way. Her actual savings account, when we talked, had $340 in it. Not because she's careless. Not because she made one catastrophic mistake, but because the architecture of her monthly life had been quietly consuming everything she earned for years. The lease was $610. The subscriptions, when she added them all up for the first time, came to $287 a month. She thought it was closer to $90. The travel was consistently going on a card that carried a balance she was making minimum payments on. And the weight of all of it, the performance of a life that cost more than her income could actually support, had become so normalized that she stopped questioning it entirely. The Federal Reserve's 2024 report on the economic well-being of U.S. households found that among adults who said they were doing okay financially, nearly 1 in 4 had less than 1 month of emergency savings. Doing okay on the outside, one unexpected bill away from a crisis on the inside. Danielle was not an outlier. She was the median. Here's something I want you to sit with for a moment. The life you're performing, the version of yourself that exists on your phone, in your social spaces, in the way you show up at work or family gatherings, how much of it is actually for you? And how much of it is a preemptive defense against being judged as someone who isn't doing well enough? I'm not asking that to make you feel exposed. I'm asking because the answer to that question is often where the money went. When Danielle finally laid everything out, every charge, every payment, every recurring cost, she found $740 a month that was going toward things she either didn't consciously choose or didn't actually value anymore. Not luxuries exactly, just the accumulated cost of performing a life rather than living one. The streaming service she hadn't opened in 4 months. The premium app tier that didn't meaningfully improve her experience. The lease on a vehicle she'd chosen because it photographed well, not because it served her life. She didn't overhaul everything overnight. That's not how this works, and that's not what I'm suggesting. What she did was quieter than that. She ended 3 subscriptions the same week. She started a high-yield savings account. In 2026, many of these are still returning between 4.5% and 5% annually, and set up an automatic transfer of $200 every payday before she could see it or spend it. Not because $200 changes everything immediately, but because the act of choosing her future over her performance, even in a small way, changed something in how she related to money at all. 6 months later, she had $2,400 in savings, more than she'd held at any point in her adult life. The number wasn't massive, but the feeling was. That feeling, and I want to name it precisely, is not excitement. It's not pride exactly. It's closer to relief. A specific kind of relief that comes from realizing you're no longer entirely at the mercy of whatever happens next. That there's a small buffer now between you and catastrophe. That you exist financially, slightly outside the emergency. That feeling is what the masquerade costs you. Not just the money, the feeling. And here's what I want you to understand about building real financial stability in 2026 specifically. The tools are genuinely accessible in a way they haven't always been. High-yield savings accounts are straightforward to open. Fractional investing means you don't need thousands of dollars to start building positions in the market. The barrier to beginning is lower than it has ever been. What remains high is the psychological barrier, the shame of starting late, the overwhelm of not knowing the right first step, the fear that it's already too late, that the gap is too large, that the people who have it figured out started with advantages you didn't have. Most of them didn't. Most of them just started. A Vanguard study on retirement readiness found that consistent, automated contributions, even small ones, produce better long-term outcomes than larger, irregular ones, because the automation removed the decision from the emotional cycle entirely. 8. You don't have to feel motivated. You don't have to feel ready. You just have to set the transfer and let time do the work that willpower alone never could. The strategic pivot away from the masquerade is not about deprivation. It's not about becoming someone who never travels or never spends on things that bring genuine joy. It's about the difference between spending that comes from abundance and spending that comes from anxiety. Between choices that reflect who you actually are and purchases that are really just a defense against how you fear others see you. That distinction, once you feel it, changes everything. Because the goal was never to look like you're winning. The goal, the real one, the one that actually matters at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, when it's just you and the number, is to actually be okay, to build something real and quiet and yours. Something that doesn't require an audience to have value. Something that compounds while you sleep. You don't need to be perfect at this. You don't need to start big. You just need to start on the side of your actual life instead of performance of it. And if you're watching this and something in it landed somewhere true, drop your age in the comments and where you're starting from. Not to compare. Just to make the room a little less quiet for the next person who finds this at 11 p.m. alone, wondering if they're the only one. They're not, and neither are you.